Sudden job loss, illness, soaring rent, falling income. There are many reasons why people can find themselves homeless. Advocates agree Chicago needs more affordable housing.
Facing the same problem, cities across the country are thinking small. Tonight, WGN's Gaynor Hall looks at housing experiment in Detroit, giving some residents a path out of poverty.
This used to be only vacant land. Now look from above. Tiny homes are sprouting up in Detroit, an affordable option for people who need housing.
My little yellow house with all of my little gorgeous flowers and all my neighbors.
At 350 square feet, Gladys Ferguson says this little yellow house with the bright red door is all she needs.
As you see, it's a beautiful little tiny house.
Gladys was among the first Detroit residents chosen to live in 7 tiny homes built by Cass Community Social Services.
If you have a city with any sort of vacant property, why would you leave it fallow when you can have a house there helping someone and helping repopulate a neighborhood? I think there's been some resistance because folks are worried about what happens to property values. If it's a good home, it shouldn't hurt property values at all.
Reverend Faith Fowler and Gladys go back decades, but when Gladys started struggling to walk, it was clear she needed fewer stairs and a safer place to live.
So when I got the offer for this, they said, well, ain't that too tiny for you? I said, child, I'm adjusted. It's just right.
I wouldn't move anywhere else. As you can tell, I have trouble walking. I sure don't need a big place.
58-year-old David Leanhouse was a pastor until epilepsy made it impossible to stand before his congregation. Losing his job also meant losing his housing.
If I didn't have this house, I don't know where I would be living.
Cass's tiny home program is targeting people who've experienced homelessness, low-income seniors, and young adults who aged out of foster care. Each home is unique and well-built, bright and energy efficient.
Pure joy here.
We'll take a tour later.
Who wouldn't want this?
It's a growing problem in Chicago.
Homelessness is a circumstance, not an identity.
It's a multiple level reason that we need tiny homes in Chicago.
In Chicago, several groups are looking at tiny homes as one option to address the urgent need for affordable housing.
This is a PDF of our issue of the paper this week.
Tracy Boehm is founder of Windy City Times and Pride Action Tank. She's working on an effort to build tiny homes to tackle homelessness in the LGBTQ community. In 2014, they held a youth summit followed by an architectural competition. And this was the result.
Everybody that saw this tiny home model, once they stepped inside of it, got it. And they saw, wow, this could have been my dorm room in college. This could have been the first place I lived in, a studio apartment. And it had so much dignity to it. It was brick and wood and beautiful.
The model home on UIC's campus has been taken down, and planning is still in the early stages. But in September, the day after Tent City residents were evicted in Uptown, a joint city council committee gave the okay to explore tiny home possibilities for vacant land in Chicago.
We're looking for quality housing that is quicker to build, lower cost to build, has dignity, has lower economic and environmental impacts, and is spread out in small pockets throughout the city of Chicago.
We definitely think it's something that we should explore in the city of Chicago.
Sol Flores sees the need for housing on a daily basis. She's executive director of La Casa Norte, which helps young people and families.
Not helping and not creating interventions for young people and families and individuals today is really the ghost of Christmas future. So how many more panhandlers do we want to see?
You needed that, yeah. La Casa Norte's youth shelter was a lifeline and a link to help for this 24-year-old who goes by the name Jaleel Carter.
He's just laying on the street. I mean, what goes through your mind?
While we walked together, we saw a man sleeping on the sidewalk. Jaleel knows what it's like to have nowhere to go.
I don't know. I don't try judging because, you never know what has happened in the person's life.
Jaleel grew up in foster care. His mother was deemed unfit to care for him when he was only 7. He aged out of the system 3 years ago. He's experienced homelessness twice.
In high school, I was homeless for like a year, and no one around me knew it. No one around me knew it. I hit it so well.
He identifies as bisexual, and he says the streets were unsafe, some shelters unwelcoming. Sometimes riding a CTA train was the only way he could sleep. He built bonds with other young people, and he says the hardest part was being separated from his street family, especially when emergency shelters were full on cold nights.
It made me cry sometimes, you know. People became your family, and then like to see that they couldn't get in, especially during the winter time, and that's when most people came to, you know, those shelters.
Jaleel says the city needs to do less talking and more listening.
You have a room full of people who've never experienced homelessness, who don't understand what it feels like to be homeless in the city of Chicago, who don't understand what it feels like to be a person of color and homeless in the city of Chicago, be a person of color homeless in the city of Chicago, and be LGBT.
It is a vast problem. I think that there are people in Chicago that know how to solve it if they had the resources. It is so frustrating to see thousands of acres of vacant property in the city, many of it within a block or two of train lines, and not having the will to solve this.
Back in Detroit, 7 cast tiny homes are now occupied, and 5 more should be move-in ready by the spring.
We haven't used a government dime, not a penny, not a nickel, nothing.
The tiny homes cost $45,000 to $65,000, and the timeline for the development depends on donations. They build nothing until they have the money. The program uses a housing-ready model with a rigorous application process, selecting residents who are prepared for home ownership. And that's the goal. In 7 years, they'll be tiny home owners.
By helping them, giving them a ladder to climb out of poverty, the next time they have a crisis, they'll have an asset where they can use it as collateral for a loan at a decent interest rate. Or if and when they die, we all do, they have something to leave generationally. So it'll impact not only a person, but potentially a family.
David pays $300 per month, $1 per square foot.
You know, everybody thinks, oh, it's going to be too small. I haven't been claustrophobic once.
And it's easy to see why. With the high ceilings and abundant windows, he even has granite countertops.
And when I first walked in here, I'm like, this is a big kitchen.
Gladys loves her kitchen and in-home laundry. The first residents moved into their fully furnished homes in August.
We just fall in line. We take care of each other.
And Reverend Fowler has faith. Tiny homes have huge potential for cities like Chicago.
Persevere, be tenacious, don't give up. It's really a good thing. I mean, our experience already with both the residents and the neighborhood has been extremely positive and well worth the fight.
It's been like marvelous, child, marvelous.
Land in Inglewood is being eyed for Chicago's first tiny home development. City officials say tiny homes are just one way to address homelessness as they work to increase affordable housing options across the city because the need is everywhere. Gaynor Hall, WGN News.
Both of our cover stories on Chicago's homeless and the Detroit Tiny Home Project can be found at WGNTV.com.
Also find a long list of resources if you or someone you know needs help with housing.